I don't think I learned much about the world since October 7th. I think much of what I'd already assumed about the world had been violently reinforced. The fact that there are hierarchies for lives, the fact that a person's death is a tragedy somewhere and another's death is a necessary evil. The fact that there is not a single threshold that the Israeli regime can cross that can make it condemnable in the eyes of empire. Not apartheid, not military occupation, not settler expansion, not incremental genocide, and now not even full-blown genocide. My name is Mohammed el-Kurd, and I'm a writer and journalist from Jerusalem, occupied Palestine. Palestinians have been facing challenges of censure, erasure, being misconstrued, being misinterpreted willfully, their words taken out of context, being vilified.
It's a good thing when terrorist leaders are assassinated, isn't it?
No, it is not, because they are not terrorist leaders.
But I think in recent months, the approach has been a lot more unabashed and a lot more unapologetic, because this whole framework is racist.
This is a genocide happening in front of our eyes.
That word is, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only, that they don't target civilians.
That's simply not the truth, unfortunately.
This phenomenon that Palestinian words are misconstrued or placed out of context is not by chance, it is by design. And it's meant ultimately, primarily, to distract from the tangible, systemic, institutional violence taking place on the ground. There is right now in Palestine a soldier berating someone, a soldier beating someone, a soldier most likely shooting at someone. There are bombs being dropped over the heads of Palestinians, and yet the conversations in the West are largely steered by abstractions and hypotheticals about words and language.
There is no way you can sit there and not condemn the actions of Hamas.
Est-ce que vous condamnez l'attaque du Hamas contre Israël?
Will you now take the opportunity to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th? I only ask you one more time.
We must refuse to engage these kinds of discursive loops that are meant to distract from the bombs being dropped, from the occupation being financed, from the literal genocide taking place against our people.
Driving into Gaza with the Israeli forces.
Palestinians are not asking journalists to do us any favor. We're simply asking them to do their jobs. The purpose of this profession is to tell the truth. And the facts on the ground are so clear. The asymmetry of power is so staggering. It simply cannot be misunderstood. So to fabricate nuance, to create layers that do not exist in reality, it's not just spinelessness, it's complicity.
Admiral, how are you?
I hear a lot from journalists who are working within mainstream institutions who say they wish they could do better, how they see things that are racist, that are anti-Palestinian, how they want to speak up against their bosses. And they tell me that they're afraid of repercussions, be it losing a paycheck or losing a reputation or being smeared as a bigot or whatnot. And I think at a certain point, you just have to acknowledge that your life is not worth more than the lives of the people you're reporting on. And you must act accordingly. We all talk about having more representation in the newsroom, and this is the time for this. This is the time to call out your boss for casual racism. This is the time to refuse pernicious media framings, like calling things Israel-Hamas war when one side is a massive nuclear state and the other is a militant group. Now is the time to refuse passive voice, war crime denialism, fact omission. Now is the time to disrupt racism in the workroom, to strike. Now is the time to become a whistleblower or to work with a whistleblower. This is the time for transformation. We tell ourselves time and time again that we are going to go into these institutions, that we are going to change things from the inside, and we pander and we get pandered to, and we take the microaggressions and we take the casual racism and we say, okay, once I make more money, once I have enough safety and security, once I establish enough of a friendly rapport with this boss or that manager, then I can speak up. And then years down the line, you realize that this bright-eyed journalism student no longer exists, and you are just as complicit as the media organizations that you once denounced. It's not enough for us to be well-meaning. You cannot be well-meaning and also not say something about lies being printed in the press. This makes you a partner in crime. I cannot overstate this partnership. The Israeli regime would not and could not operate the way it does today if it weren't for the constant coddling of the mainstream media.
As we're getting into
You know, there's this narrative that the Israeli regime is targeting journalists because they want to suppress the truth. But I don't think there's a scarcity of truth. We have seen more dead Palestinians than we have ever seen before. And still the bombs have not stopped, and still the world superpowers have not called for a ceasefire. I think what there is a scarcity of is integrity. And that is what Palestinian journalists have offered us in the past 100 days, is to stop in the middle of the massacre, to fulfill your civic duty of reporting the truth. That is integrity. And the killing of journalists cannot be isolated from the killing of Palestinian society at large. It cannot be divorced from the fact that not only journalists are being targeted, but professors, doctors, government ministries and hospitals and universities and schools. There is a coordinated attempt to kill any social or political infrastructure that exists within Gaza, not only so that it's physically uninhabitable, but so that you can no longer operate a society, that you can kill the political and national expression coming out of the Gaza Strip. That is the goal of killing journalists, I think. Zionism is indefensible. I say this a lot because people like to meddle in this idea that Zionism can have multiple meanings, that it's complicated, that while it subjugates one people, it fulfills self-determination for another people. We must reject all of this because Zionism can only be defined by the crimes, by the actions it practices today in reality. There can be no double meaning beyond the material reality that it gives us, right? You cannot talk about what's happening in Gaza today without naming the culprit, and the culprit is Zionism. Those are the principles of Zionism, not the romantic orations of people today. The facts on the ground speak for themselves. We must denounce any political ideology that elevates one people over another. In today's world, it is unfathomable that you defend anti-black racism or white supremacy or misogyny. It is unfathomable, and yet we have these debates and hypotheticals about whether Zionism is defendable, whether Zionism is viable, whether there can be nuance to Zionism. In storytelling, you're not supposed to leave the reader too anguished. So when we're talking about Gaza or Palestine, the tendency is that you end the story with talking about Palestinian people's resilience or generosity, love for life, love for one another. Oftentimes it's actually quite hard not to talk about these things. Palestinians in Gaza have been teaching us lessons in humanity. But I worry that this tendency to talk about our resilience is not about the Palestinian in Gaza, but it's about the consumer of the news. It's about me looking at these people, seeing that, yes, they are under the barrage of rockets, but they are able to keep the faith. And that makes me relax a bit. That makes me a bit complacent. It makes me feel like, khalas, God is with them, they're strong, they keep their spirits high, I don't need to do much. And it's beautiful, it's very beautiful to see Palestinians smiling in front of the camera, even as the massacre withstands. But I think what's more beautiful is the urgency that all of this has inspired. Our refusal to normalize massacres as business as usual is a lot more beautiful than singing the praises of resilience. I think Palestinians are a bit more stubborn than resilient. You know, we refuse to die. We refuse to submit. We say death over indignity. And Palestinians in Gaza have shown us this. Not only do they have the right to live, but they have the right to contempt. They have the right to feel angry, the right to fury, the right to not want to forgive, not want to be graceful, not want to be perfect victims. This is important, especially against the backdrop of a media landscape that says that the only Palestinian that should be interviewed is the docile Palestinian, is the defanged Palestinian, is the Palestinian who is willing to forgive his murderers. And I think that is absolutely dehumanizing. We humanize Palestinians by acknowledging that they, like everybody else in the world, have the right not only to hope and joy and resilience and forgiveness and grace, but also the right to contempt and anger and fury. The moral of the story here isn't that Palestinians are superior beings who are able to be kind and generous even amid destruction. If you ask me, this is about the humankind. This is about whether humanity can fail or succeed, because I know it. I know that in 10 years and 20 years' time, there's going to be all kinds of conclusions drawn about what's happening today. And people are going to say, if I were alive during that time, and if I had power during that time, well, we are alive today and we have power now, and there's something we can do about it.